Hey guys, got a message of a new chess.com friend, Pushing Wood 49, who's rated just under 700 in Rapid, and he said to me, if you don't mind, can you check out one of my games and whatever. So I've actually pulled up 5 of his previous Rapid games. I think 4 of them he starts with the white pieces, and I thought we'd just talk through them, work through them a little bit and try and identify the common areas that people in the 600 to 700 rating range will make to help Pushing Wood to advance beyond there. And if you're a beginner under 1,000, you should be able to get some tips and hints from this as well. So let's just dive in. Game number 1. So he's playing with the white pieces. His opponent's rated 644. Starts with e4, we have d5, the Scandinavian. And then a rather unusual, I've never seen this in my life, bishop to d3 I'll move to. The typical move is actually to capture the pawn. That is the best move. The issue with this move is that it's blocking off the d pawn, which may make it harder to release the dark squared bishop, for example, and also possibly like the queen or whatever. So this is an unusual place to put a bishop. Bishops don't tend to like being in the middle of the board too much, and the reason is because they're kind of pointing towards the edge of the board here, rather than the action areas kind of around here, which really these ones, right? But you know, it's a move, and if pawn takes, you can recapture with the bishop, and that's not too bad. And now we have knight out here. So the first thing that would jump out to me at this point would be to push the pawn, advance it to e5, kick this knight, make it move again, right? Because that's bad for your opponent. It costs him a tempo, which means time in Italian. So it costs him a move. He has to move his knight a second time, and that means that you can then develop your pieces further. Here white plays knight to c3. And this is kind of okay. I think one of the key things to bear in mind is counting attackers and defenders. So let's take this pawn, for example. It's attacked, let's go red, it's attacked twice, and it's defended twice. So that's okay. It means that capturing here is not in black's interest, because if takes, say knight takes, bishop takes, then they've both lost a knight, they've both lost a pawn, so there's no advantage in initiating that exchange. So black plays e6, and now we have e5, kicking the knight, and that's a good move. Now the knight comes back here, where it's blocking off black's light squared bishop. The dark squared bishop, however, has good scope to come out into the board. Knight to f3, good developing move, and now the bishop comes out. It's not pinning the knight, and if it were to capture the knight, then you've got 2 pawns that can recapture. Now what white does here, very, very common beginner move, is to move a pawn. Okay, so one principle, don't move pawns unless you really have a good reason, unless you need to move that pawn, right? Moving pawns can weaken your position, particularly this pawn that doesn't have any kind of development advantage to it. It's not releasing this bishop, which is white's final minor piece. Plus, you have to bear in mind this knight, yes, it's under attack by the bishop, but it's not a serious attack. The knight's defended twice by pawns. So here, if you allow the bishop to take, you can recapture with the d pawn. There's nothing wrong with that. It opens up a semi-open file in the middle, but for your queen, that's okay. So this is kind of unnecessary. I think here I would have very much been tempted just to castle. Get your king to safety and carry on. So the bishop retreats, and we have a double kick. Okay. Now this is okay. So the bishop now has to go back to b6. It's looking down at this pawn now, and I would hope to see castling soon. But no, what we've got is we've got this bishop here that moved itself into an awkward place, kind of needs to move again in order to get this bishop involved, right? Because this pawn is now blocked off. It can't advance here. Right, this bishop is unlikely to have much fun from b2 because it's just going to be looking at its own pawn. So the bishop really wants to come out onto this diagonal somewhere. and that means the bishop needs to move. So maybe that's the reason behind that move. But like we say, it's moving a developed piece twice, which means it's costing you a turn. This is move 8. You can complete development by move 8, on move 8. But white is still a little way off. He's still got to get this dark squared bishop out into the board. He's got to get his queen off the back rank somewhere, and he's got to castle. So he's still 3 moves off completing development. And the other thing you have to say is really, what's the point of this attack? Yep, it's pinning the knight, but it also just invites black to advance this pawn and create a London-style pyramid structure, which is pretty robust. And the bishop now has to move again. So the bishop moves back here, but again, it's looking at this pawn that's defended, because it's part of a pawn chain. So maybe, I don't know, it's not too bad. I mean, the bishop can come in here. That might be useful later on. Now, queen moves, so the queen is attacking this pawn, right? Count attackers and defenders. Knight and queen are attacking the pawn. Defenders, 1. Just the knight. So in this instance, you want to be thinking about maybe d4. d4 would be a great move. You could play queen e2. And white plays d4. Excellent. Okay, and now we have f6. Now, the f6 is commonly called the forget about it pawn, and the reason is because it opens up this diagonal towards the king. It's not a terrible move, but you've got to be very careful about the queen coming out to h5 with check. You can find yourself in difficulty. And now white castles. So probably mistimed, because let's have another look at this pawn, right? It's attacked once, twice, 3 times, and it's defended once, twice only. And that means that the pawn is vulnerable. Right? That means that if black were to take, white takes back. Black can capture again. Oh, not there. Black can capture again, and if white captures. So basically, black can win this pawn by doing the exchange, which is what happens. And now, rather than recapturing, we have the knight coming into black's space, and I can see the point in this. This pawn is now undefended. This pawn is undefended. This pawn's defended twice. White has castled and black has not. So there is scope here for an attack. We have takes now, and although the knight is under threat, white now throws in a check, but this is a relatively easy check to get out of. And now we have a situation where the queen is under attack and so is the knight. So it looks like white is going to lose a piece here because we've got 2 pieces being attacked. Now you can avoid an attack by, for example, putting your opponent in check if the king has to move. Then the king has to move and then this piece can escape, okay? But this is not one of those situations. This is putting the king in check and black can simply counterattack. So now we have a problem, okay. Now this is a good example of a counterattack. So white now captures the loose pawn on e6, and that comes with an attack against the queen. And that's something that black has to consider. So black could, for example, play pawn takes white's queen, but this is leaving this king looking very, very vulnerable. And then you're going to have white takes black's queen, but then black could recapture with the bishop. So black would actually there win a piece. What does black do? Moves the queen. And this is, I would argue, unnecessary. It's also potentially allowing, say, knight to g7 check. Let's see what happens. Knight to g7 check. There we go. And the king is in check by a knight. And because knights are jumping pieces, that you can't block a knight check. You can only either capture the attacking piece or evade. And here the king is forced to move. And now we have queen up to h6. Now this is a nice move, right? It's setting up a discovered attack against the king. Plus you have to notice that with the knight and the queen in this arrangement, the knight could, for example, move to here, and it's attacking the queen with check. Okay, so that could win the queen. White still has a hanging knight here, but this is interesting and aggressive play. This move is poor because it doesn't defend against that. So we have the knight comes out, the king's now in check, king has to move, and the knight's attacking the queen. Knight takes queen, and black here resigns. So interesting game. Just a couple of inaccuracies towards the beginning, and I think white should probably have castled sooner. Okay, let's move on to game number 2. Okay, here we have pushing wood is playing with the white pieces again, and again we have e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4. This is the Italian game, and knight to f6, and d3. It's a very classical way to start. And d6, and now the bishop comes out pinning the knight, and now the bishop comes out to here. So we have a bit of a face-off now between these two bishops. One thing you can do is simply drop this bishop back, and then if it's captured there, you recapture with the h-pawn, liberating your rook to some degree. That's one option. Here, white opts for b3, which is perfectly playable. White's definitely looking to castle kingside, so weakening the queen side is not really an issue. If bishop takes now, you capture inwards towards the centre of the board with a pawn. That's good. And we have queen moves, so is black thinking of castling queenside? If so, it makes even more sense to move this pawn, because it creates a semi-open file for rooks and queens to have fun down there. We have white castles, good. Nice to see castling a bit sooner. And black indeed castles queenside. The knight comes out. This is very good play. Remember, this is move 8. So aside from this pawn move, white here is actually making very good progress towards completing development. But either this pawn had to move or the bishop really needed to move, because the bishop was undefended there. So that's excusable. h6, kicking the bishop. Is it a serious kick? I don't know. I don't think so. I think that bishop e7 would have been much better, because that has the advantage of connecting the rooks on the back rank, which would effectively complete development here for black. You notice black's only moved 2 pawns, okay? And everything else has been a developing move as well. So this, unnecessary. White ignores the threat, or misses the threat against the bishop, and loses the bishop. Okay, so, I mean, that, if you do nothing else on games, remember this is a 45 plus 45 game. I think they all are, right? If you do nothing else, zip round the board and look to see for any pieces other than rooks and kings that are undefended, right? And on white's side, there is one undefended piece, which is the bishop. Right? Only takes a few seconds to scan the board. You've got time. You should have time. You have to give yourself time. So I think here, dropping the bishop back to e3 would have been fine. So he's blundered a bishop, basically. Now the knight comes in. White grabs a free pawn, well spotted. And we have a pawn push attacking pawn and bishop. But here, pawn takes is hitting 2 pieces. This is a pawn fork. However, the pawn itself is actually attacked 3 times. And it's defended only by the bishop. So there's no issue now with black actually capturing that pawn. However, I noticed that if the queen should move away from the defense of this pawn at any time, it's also defended by the bishop there, isn't it? But there, you might have ideas of capturing on f7 here and forking the 2 rooks. There might be an opportunity for that later on. Say, for example, drop the knight back to here, bishop takes, then the queen can't recapture. Actually, that's not a bad move. Okay, anyway, so we have f3 kicking the knight away, which sounds like a song. Right, now here I would probably recapture, I think the d pawn would be fine. I think the b pawn would be okay as well. The b pawn would give you opportunities to use the rook down there. Capturing with the d pawn could give you ideas of putting either 1 or 2 rooks on the d file. White captures the knight. Okay. Yeah, so we attack the knight on the previous move. We have bishop takes, and here, so black has got 2 pieces now under attack, and white decides to capture the knight. This has the benefit of meaning that the rook and the knight are both now attacking this pawn on f7 with the resulting fork. So that's pretty good. So we have a check. So black elects not to rescue this bishop. In fact, bishop could simply take the knight there, which would leave black 5 points in front. And we have a pawn block. This is interesting. But here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces attacking that pawn. So the bishop captures. King has to move. I also noticed that with his pawn move, the queen is white has created a discovered attack against his own queen here, but black clearly misses that. Takes the pawn with check. King has to move. Do we lose the queen? No. Black is too interested in his own idea of having the fork against the king and queen. So wow. So not the best game so far by white. The queen is under attack. You should go around and say, okay, what's undefended? That's defended by that. That knight's undefended, and the queen is undefended. Right? Big warning lights should be flashing them. However, the attacker of the queen is also under attack itself. So the best move here, b takes bishop. But we don't have that even. Rook takes f7. Now a better move than that, I think, is probably knight takes f7 because it comes with this fork. But even better, capture the damn bishop that's attacking your queen. Queen takes bishop would have been good there. But now we have this, and it's attacking the queen. Yeah, fair enough. Queen moves down to there. Are we going to see this? Has he noticed yet? Has he noticed yet that his queen's under attack? No, he comes in with a check. Okay, fair enough. And now white takes black's queen. Black takes white's queen. Wow, this is kind of a mess. But okay, so what's undefended, what's under attack? This is dizzying now, okay? Undefended, undefended, defended by that, undefended. These are defending each other. That's the benefit of having your rooks connected, and the king's defending those, okay? In white's camp, let's do these in blue, okay? Undefended, 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 undefended. And the king's defending these. So it's a complete muddle. A complete muddle. These pawns are both defending that. Okay, so almost everything is undefended on white's camp. Let's see how it all pans out. Okay, so now we have the knight to e6, and that defends this rook. That's good. But boom, rook to d1 is a shocking checkmate. So that, okay, admittedly, the opponent here was rated in the 700s. So number one, king safety, you've got to look out for checkmate threats. But also, really important thing, just try to keep your pieces coordinated. Look at the whole board. Look what's undefended, because there may be captures. White here left his queen hanging for a long time. And you're not going to get very much further in chess doing things like that. At the very minimum, scan the board on every move. He's got 48 minutes left on the clock, which is more time than he started with, right? If you do nothing else, then go through. If you're playing in the browser, you can right-click and highlight. You can right-click and drag to show, to create arrows, to show the defensive structure. So, yeah, big old mess. Let's move on to game 3. Okay, we have again the white pieces, and we have e4, and now c6, the Caro-Kann. d4, grabbing the center. Now b5. This is slightly unusual. Okay, it's Obviously a non-standard move, there's no name for this opening. Still, it's not really doing anything to release the light squared bishop. The dark squared bishop's still stuck in. The knights can obviously jump out at any time. One of the issues with the Caro-Kann is it takes away the c6 square for this knight. Unusual. Knight to c3. Whoa. And now another pawn move. The g pawn comes out. Okay, another knight move. So this is more solid now from white. We have a pawn push kicking the knight, and the knight moves out to the rim. See, the knight doesn't have an awful lot of future here. Can't go there. This square maybe, but I think from here I might have considered moving round, and then maybe to g3. Get your bishop out, castle kingside. That would have been very, very solid. But we have knight to the rim. Another pawn push kicking the knight. This guy likes just kicking pieces, but he's leaving these pawns extremely isolated now. And white has quite a tasty knight now in the middle of the board. I'm expecting a pawn to fly out and attack it. No, pawn flies out all the way to f5. The forget about it pawn forgot to forget about it and has made the king maybe vulnerable. Bishop now to c4, and at this point black's spider senses should be tingling because there's a threat of mate in 1. Can you see the threat? Alright, we have a king with no squares at all where it can move. We have f takes e4. This is just gung-ho play from black. I don't like this play. And bishop to f7, check and mate. If my name was Simon, I would say put that in your pipe and smoke it. But it's not, so I won't. Okay, there we go. Complete catastrophe of an opening from black here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Like every single piece, all the pieces are still on the back rank. There's no actual development gone on. All the pawn moves are just insane and random. That's just simply a terrible game, but well spotted to white, well spotted for spotting the mating opportunity, and to get checkmate on move 8. That's got to feel good. Okay, now we're playing with the black pieces. So white opens with c3, the Van Giet opening. Unusual. Right, the opponent is rated 616, is now slightly lower than pushing wood. And we have e5, e4, and knight to f6. So this is now fairly standard. This is actually the Vienna game, if you look at it. So white could now play for the Vienna Gambit, if he knows about the Vienna Gambit, which is lots of fun, and I enjoy playing it myself. And a4. Why? Bishop out to b4, and ooh dear. Okay. Black, your opponent has just moved a major piece in line of fire of your bishop. Are we going to spot it? Are we going to take it? No, we're not. We're going to push d6 instead. It's right under your bishop's nose. Take the damn rook. Okay, anyway. So rook attacks bishop, knight defends bishop. Good. Good. I like to see this, right? An absolute beginner would go, oh no, my bishop's under attack, therefore I must move my bishop. Well, no, not always, because you can defend the attacked piece, or you can counterattack. There are lots of things you can do, and here, this is great to see, because he's developed a piece and achieved what he needed to achieve, which is to protect the bishop from the rook. It doesn't make sense for rook to take bishop and then fall to the knight. Okay, and now we have another pawn moving down the edge. Okay, yeah, it's maybe preventing the knight or the bishop from going to g4, but it's not really helping development, is it? And this is a bit random from black. Moving this pawn to a position where, let's see, 1, 2, 3 attackers. And how many defenders? Bah, bah, none. What is the point of that? Okay, so the knight takes. The pawn or the knight or the bishop could quite freely have taken that. I think the bishop might have been the best piece, actually. on white's part, because it pins this knight against the king, and it removes one of the minor pieces on the king's side, making it, so white is now one step closer to castling. White clearly can't castle on the queen side because the rook's moved, trying to sacrifice itself and failing. But that we have knight takes, not the best move. A6 now, kicking the knight away, knight moves away, and now we have A5, protecting the bishop. Okay, fair enough. That's a second defender against the bishop that's only attacked once. Okay. We have a pawn push, and now maybe, again, I would have thought about castling, but we'll see. Okay, so you have knight to d4, which is an interesting move. I mean, it's attacking this rook, and the rook, you'll notice, has nowhere to go. So there's a reason why we don't bring our rooks flying out into the board too early on. It's the same reason why we don't bring our queens out into the board early on. It's because they can get attacked and then have to retreat, or can get trapped, as in this case. So the rook has nowhere to go, has to capture. Pawn captures. Well done. You finally captured the rook that was trying to get itself captured all this time. Knight now comes around to attack the pawn. I wouldn't worry too much about that. You've got c5, you've got rook b8. They would work. Okay, this is all right. Okay, so no, it's not. Right, one attacker and then two attackers. See, once that one moves, there's a second attacker. Defenders, one. So here white could take the pawn. White takes the pawn. Black takes the pawn. Black blunders his knight. Bad black. No. Queen advances for no discernible reason, and we have bishop out to a6. This is not a bad idea. At least it's connecting all these major pieces now on the back rank. That's not too bad. It means we can drop a rook across to the open file if we want to. Knight comes out. Now white's thinking about, maybe I should castle my king. Okay, beginner issue, right? Get your king castled. We're on move 15 already. Okay, rook attacks the queen, decent move. Queen moves out the way. This queen's now not much of a threat, because look, the queen's on a dark square here, and we've got a nice dark square pawn structure. So the queen's not got an awful lot of scope right now. If white could get like bishop round to here as well, he might even think about dropping a rook in there and really causing trouble. Okay, this is maybe slightly dubious, because this pawn push actually undefends this pawn here, which is under attack by the knight. When you've got a nice pawn structure like that, leave it. It's good. Right? You've got a dark squared pawn structure and you've got a light squared bishop, which means that this bishop has freedom of movement. Right? Free passport all the way, can move through this pawn structure quite happily. This dark squared bishop cannot, and right now the queen can't either. So I think this is dubious. It also undefends this pawn, which is under attack, as we've said. Not there. Yeah. White doesn't spot that, and oh, this is poor. Right. Can you see the problem with this? Look at where that king is. It's in the middle of the board. It hasn't castled, right? So it's not safe. You can't say that king is safe right now, and you don't want to be pushing pawns on the side where you might intend to castle your king. You should castle your king first, get this rook into the game, right? So you want to get that bishop out of the way, get castled, and the king's nice and snug now there, like black's king is nice and snug. I think this is a foolhardy move. We have pawn takes, knight could take now. Nope, we have c5. I think knight takes would have been perfectly reasonable there. And bishop takes bishop. Okay, so with this pawn move, discovered attack, right? Every move, go around the board. What's defended? Oh, that's undefended, right? That's undefended. What's under attack? Oh yeah. Ooh, I better move my bishop, huh? So bishop takes bishop would have been great, because white would have had to have recaptured with either the king or the rook, and that's goodbye castling rights for white. It would have left black in a really good position, but oh no, c5, bishop falls, and now we have queen. This is a nice move, well spotted for black. This is a queen fork. Queen to there, attacking the king, which is in check, and also attacking the bishop here. So, is there any way out of this? Bishop blocks, queen recaptures the bishop. Well done. So, all is forgiven. Now, queen checks again. Now, this time the knight blocks. And we have the rook moving across to the open d file. Pawn advances to hit the knight. Not much point to that. Oh, yeah, this is a good move. This is a very, very, very standard tactic, right? When you notice that there is a pinned piece, right? This knight is in an absolute pin, which means that it cannot legally move because it would leave the king in check. Therefore, right, when you've got a piece in an absolute pin, any piece that it is the sole defender of, right, is not defended because the defender cannot move to recapture. So takes, and the knight cannot recapture because it would leave the king in check, and that's not allowed. And now we have bishop blocks, and now this breaks the pin on the knight, and now the knight could capture. However, this knight can actually capture either the knight or the bishop, and I'm really hoping to see one of those moves. What is that? Okay, this is terrible. Here, black should have captured one of these pieces. Very, very clearly, right? Instead, maybe he's thinking about doubling rooks, but he's got 51 minutes on the clock here, okay? What's undefended? I mean, this stuff isn't... I guess that knight is undefended, but the king's still in the middle of the board. Get rid of the bishop. That's what I'd have done. Get rid of the bishop. Because now, if this knight captures that knight, the queen is under threat. So that is actually a free capture. White could have captured the knight for free, but doesn't. Instead, he moves his queen somewhere. And now we have bishop knight takes bishop. Now we have a proposed exchange of queens. It's arguable. I mean, white is up the exchange right now. No, white is not up the exchange. Let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3 minor pieces. Black is up the exchange. No. So, hang on. 1, 2, 3 minor pieces. Because the chess.com board is not showing properly. Black has 2 rooks. So, with black having 2 rooks, I probably wouldn't... yeah, black is up the exchange. I wouldn't propose an exchange of queens at this point, particularly when you've got a hanging piece. There you go. Black takes the bishop, but takes the rook. Knight with check. Okay, king has to move, and now I see a tactic. Do you see the tactic? Black saw the tactic. Boom! Attacking the king and attacking the queen. A knight fork, well spotted. King moves, queen falls. King moves again. That's nice. Rook to d4 check. Where can this king go? I think he's only got 1 square. King to b3 is played. Pawn advances. Pawn is defended, and the king now has 2 squares to go to. King goes to c2. Rooks double up. This is nice to see. This is some solid play. I would here exchange rooks quite happily all day long. Nope. Goes there, maybe attacking the knight. Queen moves in. Pawn captures knight. Queen moves in again. Checkmate is surely going to come soon. King moves away. Rook takes king. That is check. And the only option is to capture with a knight. And there we go, checkmate. So nice finish by black in the end. But some clear blunders again. And the way to get around that is to take your time. Simply highlight, if you're able to, highlight all undefended pieces. Scan the board. Right, look at the entire board and then decide what to do. You've got to get out of the idea that that you had on the previous move. Right, don't automatically continue with your current idea because your opponent has just done something that has changed the board. You've got to rescan the whole board, get the whole picture, take your time, step away, fold your arms, take a deep breath. Okay, this is the situation. That's under attack, that's not defended, this, that and the other, right? There we go. Okay, so that's game number 4. Let's look at game number 5. Again, we've now got the white pieces, and we start with the Reti. Knight to f3 on move 1. Mixing it up a bit here. Pawn to d5, the other knight comes out. Knight to f6. Okay, so we've got like a King's Indian structure going on white side. Bishop comes out. You don't want to do this. What's the point in that move? h3 serves no purpose whatsoever. If you're going to do a King's Indian, you want to keep these pawns on the dark squares. You put your bishop there in your castle. Keep it solid, right? That means that when your king is here, it's defending this pawn, right? You move the pawn to there. Yes, the bishop might be defending it, but there's no purpose to this move whatsoever. e6, and now g4, so we're not going for the King's Indian setup. Okay, kicks the bishop, bishop has to move. Another pawn push, right? Don't want to make too many pawn pushes, because every time you push a pawn, that's a turn that you are not spending developing your pieces. Bishop comes down, another pawn push. Now h5. Here you might even have been tempted just to push that and kick the knight again, because knight can't go there or there. No, it can't go there. It can go there. Potentially swap itself off. Okay, b4. So where's white going to castle there? That's what I want to know. You want to keep the pawns at least on one side of the board tight and close, so that you've got that protection around your king. It's your king's bodyguard. Okay, so look at the situation though. Black has 3 developed pieces and white only has 2, because he's moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawns, and we are now on move 8. You can complete development by this point. Okay, now we have g5 kicking the knight. Knight comes in. We could have an exchange of knights there, but instead rook to b1. Okay, you've got to be very careful here. If this pawn moves, you could have knight takes knight with a fork against the queen and the rook. That would be very unpleasant. Black now castles. Oh no, don't move that pawn. Whew. Black didn't notice. Now the bishop rook moves to defend the knight. Pawn takes pawn, opening up a semi-open file for the rook. This is not looking very tidy for white. Okay, knight comes into e5. That's a lovely square for a knight. It's attacking this bishop here. Does black notice? Kind of, yes. Defends with the queen. And also there's a threat here. Look at this now. Queen and rook and, not you, knight. All attacking the f2 square. This could end horribly. Pawn push. Stop pushing pawns. Check and mate. Well, white deserved that. That was very, very poor play. Lots and lots of pawn pushes. Never castle your king. Okay? There are reasons why we have these principles, right? Get your stupid king castled in the corner. Get your rooks into the game. Get your minor pieces out into the board, right? That's what development's about. It's not for the sake of a checklist. It's for the sake of controlling more of the board, reducing your opponent's opportunities and choices, and maximizing your own. And here, black just had a very easy run, 14 moves, and it's all over. So we've seen a very mixed bag here of some very nice moves, but also some probably sloppy play as well. On the part of pushing wood. I think the main things to think about, just highlight all the undefended pieces. That when we're kind of getting into the middle game, that's very important. Until it's second nature for you to scan the board and see what's undefended, see what your opponent's opportunities are, see what your opportunities are, then take the time, highlight it, or at least go through and go one by one. Is it defended? Is it under attack? Is that defended? Is it under attack? Okay. To finish a game in this manner with 28 minutes on the clock is not a great feeling. Okay, so that's my number one piece of advice. And the second one is just focus on completing development. And pawn pushes, you've got to have a very good reason, right? Don't just kick a piece for the sake of kicking a piece, right? Because every pawn push comes at a cost. There's an opportunity cost to your development if you do that. So be very careful. So that's it. A whole bunch of tips there for people rated in the 600 to 700 range, even up to 1000. A lot of this stuff will come in handy. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you spending your time. Please subscribe to Chess Bootcamp if you haven't subscribed, and I'll see you soon.